day everyone, I am David Gardner. In this first part of Module 3, we'll describe 10 impacts that housing has on developing countries' economies. These 10 impacts will be the foundation of our understanding of the theory of housing economic value chains that will be covered in parts 2 and 3. We will talk through these 10 economic impacts from the very practical point of view of one household building rooms for rent on land that they control in any African city. When thinking about the housing economy of a country, every house matters. The total economic impact of housing construction and rental activity in a country is simply the consolidated picture of every household's individual housing investment, purchase, and rental decisions. Housing practitioners often focus on architect-designed, formally constructed, approved, and legally titled housing units. Yet, in developing economies, most houses don't meet these formal standards. They are mostly in unplanned areas, many informally constructed, without access to services and amenities. But in economic terms, they still matter and make up the majority of the housing stock and therefore economic activity in most developing nations' housing sectors. Every housing action, however small and seemingly insignificant, contributes to housing improvements and economic growth. And this is how. First, the decision to dedicate household resources to housing means those resources don't get spent on other expenses. These household investments include monetary savings and building materials stockpiles. They also include a regular proportion of household income diverted into housing. And they include the household's time and energy spent on building and managing those units. Second, the decision to focus household resources on housing investment instead of short-term needs starts to build a long-term, even intergenerational asset. This adds to the housing factory of the economy. This housing factory comprises all houses built or bought for households themselves and all accommodation built to rent to other households. Third, investment in new accommodation creates homes that can be rented out. And so it offers other households the opportunity to rent newly constructed and affordable accommodation. These new accommodation units are added to the overall housing supply of the city as well as the country. They offer housing opportunities or different accommodation types for households to choose from. Fourth, housing investment starts the process of that household asset producing regular and increasing household income from rental. Housing is one of the safest and largest investment types. This is especially true in developing economies where there are limited numbers of affordable housing units for the many households to access. Fifth, the process of building this accommodation helps to develop and grow the local construction sector. Building contractors are appointed to do the work, and they can sustain their labor force and improve their business capacity. This ensures that value is added to the country's construction sector. Sixth, the construction process itself requires building materials and services from upstream in the economy. This process creates upstream economic stimuli for construction materials such as bricks, window frames, cement, electrical and plumbing fittings, and for housing-related services, including architects, engineers, surveyors, realtors, and housing financiers. Seventh is the housing component of the overall engine that drives the country's economic expansion. All of the resources spent on housing development in a particular year increases the domestic production of housing. That in turn is added to the total housing stock, and together this stock makes up gross fixed capital formation. Eighth, the increase in the number and types of houses available in the market stimulates demand for other goods and services. For instance, once people have secured housing, they often spend more on furniture, electronic goods, and other services such as security, education, and even healthcare. This indirect economic impact is created by better access to secure housing. Ninth, a growing housing market creates economic spin-offs for local and national governments. This includes greater demand for revenue-generating services such as water and electricity. Also, it creates a base for property levies and taxes. The housing development process is also an important base for direct government investment or subsidization of housing. This could be through the provision of land, the installation of services, or the payment of subsidies directly to households for housing. 10th, this process of housing investment, creation and economic stimulation creates a solid base for further housing investment. Households that build their own houses or build accommodation to rent generally never stop investing in housing. They continue to invest through extending this housing, building more units, or selling in order to buy another home higher up the housing ladder. Housing construction and rental, therefore, contribute much more than just houses for more households to occupy. It creates assets and regular income for households. It builds businesses and sustainable employment in the construction economy. It stimulates many upstream value chains, including the manufacturing and services sectors. It grows fixed capital in the economy, and it stimulates demand for linked goods and services, as well as for government services and taxable revenue. In these ways, housing helps to build economies while at the same time offering shelter to those who need it. In part 2, we will discuss the economic concepts that surround the 10 housing impacts that we have just discussed in more detail. These concepts are the building blocks for understanding housing economic value chains.